A woman in Argentina sells her apartment. She does not accept pesos, she asks for dollars. A rebel group in the mountains of Africa hides its war chest, not in gold, not in local currency, but in stacks of $100 bills. A central bank in Tokyo, thousands of miles from Washington, D.C., holds over $1 trillion in American debt. None of these people are American. None of them live under the American flag. And yet, in the most important financial decisions of their lives, they all trust one thing: a piece of paper printed by the United States government. Why? Why does a single country's currency control the fate of nations that have nothing to do with it? This is the story of how one piece of paper conquered the world without a single shot being fired.
Right now, in vaults and databases across the globe, central banks are holding trillions of US dollars, not euros, not yen, not gold even. Dollars. Nearly 90% of all currency trades on Earth involve the US dollar on one side of the deal. Oil, the most traded commodity in human history, is priced in dollars, even when neither the buyer nor the seller is American. If a bank in India wants to buy oil from Saudi Arabia, the transaction is more likely to run through New York than through New Delhi or Riyadh. Think about that for a second. Two countries doing business with each other, and the money still has to pass through a third country that isn't even part of the deal. This isn't an accident. It isn't a coincidence. It is the result of decisions made in secret rooms, wars that changed the rules of money, and a system so deeply embedded in global trade that most people never even question it. But every empire has a beginning, and every empire eventually faces a threat to its throne. To understand how the dollar became the most powerful currency in history, we have to go back before oil, before world wars, before the dollar was even worth anything at all.
In the late 1700s, a newly independent United States needed a currency of its own. The dollar was born, modeled partly on the Spanish silver dollar that was already circulating in the Americas. For most of its early life, the dollar was nothing special. It was a regional currency for a young, unstable nation, a country still finding its feet, still fighting a civil war, still decades away from being a global power. The real turning point came from something almost nobody expects: geography and timing. While Europe tore itself apart in 2 world wars, the United States sat an ocean away. Its factories were untouched, its cities were not bombed into rubble, its farmland kept producing food while the fields of France and the factories of Germany turned to ash. By the end of World War II, Europe was in ruins. Britain, once the owner of the world's dominant currency, was drowning in debt. Germany and Japan were physically destroyed, and the United States held something no other nation on Earth had in the same quantity: gold. Roughly 2/3 of the world's official gold reserves sat inside American vaults. The world needed to rebuild, and rebuilding needed money everyone could trust. That trust was about to be written into law in a hotel in the mountains of New Hampshire by men who would quietly reshape the entire global economy. In July of 1944, delegates from 44 nations arrived at a hotel called Mount Washington in a small town called Bretton Woods. World War II was not even over yet, but the Allied nations already knew they needed a plan for what came next: a new financial order to prevent the chaos that had helped cause the war in the first place. 2 men dominated the room. On one side, John Maynard Keynes, the brilliant British economist, a man whose ideas had already reshaped economic thinking across the world. Keynes proposed something radical: a new, neutral, global currency called the Bancor, which no single nation would control. On the other side, Harry Dexter White, a U.S. Treasury official with a very different vision. White wanted a system built around the U.S. dollar, backed by American gold. It wasn't really a debate. Britain was broke. The United States held the gold, the factories, and the military power, and in international negotiations, leverage usually wins over logic. The final agreement was almost entirely White's vision. The US dollar would be pegged to gold at a fixed rate of $35 per ounce. Every other major currency in the world would then be pegged to the dollar. In simple terms, the dollar became as good as gold, and every other currency became as good as the dollar. Two new institutions were created to manage this system: the International Monetary Fund to help countries facing financial crises, and the World Bank to fund rebuilding and development. For the first time in history, one nation's paper currency became the literal foundation of the global economy. It seemed like the perfect system, stable, predictable, backed by real gold sitting in a vault in Kentucky. But there was a hidden flaw in this system, a flaw that would take almost 30 years to surface, and when it did, it would shatter the entire arrangement in a single television broadcast. By the late 1960s, something didn't add up. The United States was spending enormous amounts of money, funding the Vietnam War, funding social programs, and simply printing more dollars than its gold reserves could actually back. Here's the problem in simple terms. Imagine a small-town bank promises that anyone can walk in and trade their paper receipts for real gold whenever they want. That's fine, as long as most people don't ask for their gold at the same time. But foreign governments started to notice the US was printing far more dollars than it had gold to support. France, under President Charles de Gaulle, began doing exactly what the system technically allowed: shipping actual US gold out of American vaults in exchange for dollars. Other nations began quietly doing the same. America's gold reserves were draining, and if this continued, the United States would eventually run out of gold entirely. On August 15, 1971, President Richard Nixon appeared on national television with an announcement that would reshape the entire global financial system. The United States, he said, was suspending the convertibility of the dollar into gold. In plain language, the promise was over. You could no longer trade dollars for gold, not foreign banks, not anyone. This moment is now known as the Nixon shock. Overnight, the dollar transformed from a currency backed by a physical, tangible asset into something entirely new, a currency backed by nothing but trust in the United States government. Economists call this fiat currency, money that has value simply because people believe it has value, and because a government declares it as legal tender. This should have been the moment the dollar's dominance ended, a currency backed by nothing, floating freely, its value determined purely by faith. Instead, incredibly, the opposite happened. The dollar's power did not shrink, it grew stronger than ever. How does a currency backed by nothing become more powerful than a currency backed by gold? The answer lies beneath the desert sands of the Middle East. In the early 1970s, the United States faced an urgent problem. The dollar had just been unpegged from gold. If the world lost confidence in it, the entire American economy, in the global financial system built on top of it, could collapse. Washington needed a new anchor, not gold this time, something the entire world needed just as desperately: oil. In 1973, following the oil crisis and tense negotiations, the United States struck a landmark arrangement with Saudi Arabia, the world's largest oil exporter. The deal was simple but brilliant. Saudi Arabia would sell its oil exclusively in US dollars, and in return, the United States would provide military protection and support to the Saudi kingdom. Over the following years, other members of OPEC, the Organization of Major Oil Exporting Nations, fell in line with the same arrangement. This system became known as the petrodollar. Here's why it mattered so much. Oil is the bloodline of every modern economy, powering vehicles, industries, and electricity grids. Every single country on Earth needs oil, and now every single country needed dollars to buy it. Suddenly, nations that had nothing to do with America were forced to acquire and hold US dollars simply to keep their lights on and their factories running. Japan needed dollars for oil. Germany needed dollars for oil. India needed dollars for oil. Countries that had never even done direct business with the United States now had to earn, hold, and use American currency just to survive economically. This is the moment the dollar's power became almost invisible but unbreakable. It was no longer just America's currency. It became the currency the entire world needed to run its economies. But this raises a deeper question. Just needing dollars for oil is one thing. Why do central banks, the most powerful financial institutions on the planet, choose to stockpile dollars by the trillions even when they're not buying oil at all?